So for those of you in the room, we have a presentation that I posted or sent out a week ago. But if you want to follow along, it is this one
Okay.
and this one. So I want to just kind of get through this quickly. We got a late start. We got to be out of here by 6:15 for the planning board. So I want to run through the two sets of documents I have here with the board. If we have the time at the end, we'll get into some discussion. But my sense is that we should both wait from the board perspective and from the public perspective till after you've had a chance to go through both documents. And this is only the first one. All right, let me now go to my, they're looking at, that's an Acrobat. Okay. I'm not.
There he
There we go.
is.
All right, so basically, this is just an analysis of what the seasonal communities regulations cover. So originally, seasonal communities was a legislative, solution that was passed last August, I believe it was. Took the state, well, that was 24, so about 18 months to develop the regulations, which they finally have final regulations. There's zoning mandates, there's a year-round housing trust, there's artist housing, tax exemption, essential worker preference, and the ability to raise area median income above the 100, maybe for homeownership, 110%, which is where it stands now. All right. So Stockbridge has done a good job at building its sort of a combination of affordable housing. We've got Riverbrook, we've got 32 units at Pinewoods, and we have 53 units at Keene Court for senior housing. What we haven't been great at is necessarily kind of figuring out how to keep the middle class here. So I mean, this is no news to anyone here. I've been advocating for this for a long time. And the idea here is to really try to see if there's some strategies around here that can bring down the ratio of basically what you make when you're starting off versus what a house that you can afford when you're starting off. It used to be when my parents bought their house around 4 times. The house I live in now costs 4 times what my mom and dad made in 1960. And now it's more like 15 to 20 times. And I think that data helps us encapsulate what the issues are here. As a result, I just got off the phone with the superintendent. There's 12 kids in the 12th grade, and there's 3 kids from Stockbridge in the 7th grade. There are 4 kids from Stockbridge in the 1st grade. There are, I think it's 7 in the 4th grade. The point is this: I've got a picture of myself in kindergarten and 1st grade when they used to take those pictures in this building, and there were well over 30 people in my class. So we've seen an erosion of, start level people with children for years, but we've seen it 3 or 4 kids fewer a year over 50 years. And so it's like a frog in a pot. Maybe a lot of people didn't notice it or just felt like, as many people have said, that the ship has sailed. I don't know, I don't know if they're telling me, well, I booked the meeting on my calendar. Okay, I don't. A lot of things stop working, and we've seen this on the Cape. With it's been really hard to find tradesmen and teachers and hospital workers and ambulance workers and all that. I'm not telling you you don't know. This is why I think we should be taking a look at this. I think especially in the middle class, this could really stabilize the community in a way that I think we've just kind of normalized the weird around here. I've said that before. When we were much younger here, Coke, there's a lot more families and a lot more kids to play with. Even just the idea that there's only 3 kids from your town in your grade. Imagine that guy that just left your 7th grade, all right? And he's got whatever it is, 5 kids in the 7th grade or 10th, 12th grade for those kids. That means that there's fewer families who can kind of have the kids over to give the parents a break. The parents become the companion for the kid because there's no one around to play with, no one to ride your bike to. A lot of weird stuff happens when there's no kids around. Anyway, that's it. So what are the mandates? First of all, there's nothing in the Stockbridge bylaw that I can find that prohibits tiny homes now. Somebody wants to spend all the money for land and they want to put in a 400 square foot house, they can do it. What we can ban legally is allowing them to be put on wheels, basically making trailers. So that's one mandate, but I think that's a relatively empty one. The minimum lot size formula, I have to admit, this is something that was more ambitious from the state's perspective than what I expected. They're basically saying that that for attainable housing, and I want to emphasize this only would apply to year-round housing. This isn't changing Stockbridge zoning, all right? For attainable housing, a 1 acre zone would be reclassified with 10,800 square feet. A 2 acre zone, if you're building for year-round housing, would be 21,780 square feet, and a 4 acre zone, a house would be basically 1 acre. Now, I want to point out that the market right now for a house, this is deed restricted forever restrictions. Okay, so in my mind, the Affordable Housing Trust or a bank might give you $25,000 each for a down payment. But think about the haircut you're taking if you're just a homeowner. Like if I were going to move to a bigger house in Stockbridge, I could sell the house I have. It's worth a lot of money. Like a lot of us have most of our wealth in a house. All right. For me to take $50,000 for an attainable, to be able to do these smaller lot sizes, okay, that permanently restricts who you're then able to sell it to. You can't sell it to a second homeowner. You can't sell it to an Airbnb person. It has to be lived in 10 months a year. All right. So we spent a year doing that housing production plan, and we have a goal of creating 25 houses in the next 5 years. And at these numbers, to create 25 houses, we would need, if you do a split between which zone they're in, you need about 15 acres of relaxed zoning in the whole town to build the 25 houses that are our big goal. This town has 15,168 acres in it. Okay, like a lot of people are seeing this as a controversial decision, and frankly, what I see is 15 acres is like a rounding error. Elm Court wants to do 38 new houses, and I think at DeSisto we permitted, I think it's 23 single families plus, God knows how many of the hotel residences, which are basically homes. I think 25 is pretty modest, and I think that the changes we need to zoning are also pretty modest.
Patrick, could I interrupt you for a minute?
Sure.
So in your last slide, it basically, says that to do the 25 new houses, it would require 15 acres. But, that is assuming that everybody who can build on a smaller lot does want to do that with those restrictions that you mentioned. And I think it's very unlikely that that's going to happen.
You think that people won't accept the restrictions or will?
I think there won't be as much of an incentive to build on their sublots because of the restrictions. There will be some probably, but
yeah, I think absent, I completely agree with you, Jan. I think absent a subsidy and absent somebody who just cannot afford a house in the Berkshires. This morning I talked to one of the single mom who's a parent at Waldorf. And she was like, I really want to buy a house. So if you hear of anything, I know you're really involved in the housing, I could probably swing $400,000. Okay. She's got 2 kids. And the only way she's going to get into a house is if it's a kid house or something like what we saw at up by the Pike there, and if she gets a big down payment assistance. And in the absence of that, why would anyone accept these kind of resale restrictions? She doesn't want to flip her house. She wants a forever house because she's tired of crappy rentals for her and her family. She's kind of like me. I plan on living in my house till I die. I don't care how much the house is worth. People are looking for their forever home here, or maybe they're like first-time home buyers who are young folks who want to build their credit. and maybe get a little upside like 10 or 20 grand after 5 or 10 years. You know, that's, I think, the only market for this stuff.
Finding this property for a good price is going to be very difficult.
Yeah, I think that there's really two places where the properties will come from. I was approached by an elderly gentleman my first year on the select board who wanted to sell his giant 4-bedroom house to the Affordable Housing Trust for 300 grand at a time when it was worth about 7. And he said, I don't need the money, and I raised my family here, and I want this house to serve a family like mine. It was so joyful for me to raise my family on this street. I want another family to come in and buy this house. And this trust hadn't been formed yet, so we couldn't kind of pull it off. But I think there's some folks around here who maybe have a house and maybe don't need the $300,000 or $400,000 hiccup. I also think that if we were to convince some people to deed restrict an existing house in the housing stock, that the assessor should recognize the house is then worth less, which would then lower their taxes. So I think that we can use sort of like, maybe we could get 3 or 4 or 5 houses over 5 years actually deed restricted by their current owners. And the other 20, it's the Kemmeyer model. It's like they built that 1,800 square foot house for $400,000. And is there a way to be creative about this stuff? And because there's no upside, you know, it's kind of like, it's like people aren't going to flip it. I don't know. What do you think of either or both of those?
Well, I'm thinking about Kammeyer's property. The property that they put the house on was a separate lot. So if there are people here who want to, break up their property a little bit, I can see that happening. But you also have to fit all the requirements of frontage and all that good stuff.
I mean, my sense is what we might want to do is look in R2 for 20 acres. This is Mark's idea, I think. We buy 20 acres and it becomes half-acre lots. And we do our own basically work with a developer who could then turn that into a number of middle-class houses. So, you know, I don't know that we have to. If people want to split it up, it's fine. Like you said, I'm not sure there's much of a market, or Jan said, I'm not sure there's much of a market for this stuff. Okay. Residential exemption. It's never been adopted anywhere in Berkshire County, let alone Stockbridge. Regardless of how hard some of us worked on that, it has not happened. I think that this is something that is designed for places like Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, but you know, it does shift it. The maximum amount of the percentage of value at the median goes from 35 to 50% if you wanted to adopt it.
And I want to underscore that, Patrick, if you want to adopt it, if we went forward and endorsed the community designation, the town does not need to do this.
No, of course not. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
That they adopt a residential tax exemption at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think that there's 2 ways to keep taxes affordable. One is new growth, and the other is you do a shift. You can do a shift to commercial. You can do a shift to second homeowners. They're both highly controversial. Yeah, all ways to keep taxes are highly controversial. Now, a lot of people didn't like the Elm Court decision. I mean, the DeCicco decision, and some people don't like that Elm Court may get permitted. You know, but for somebody struggling on a fixed income whose house was worth 300,000 12 years ago and is worth 800,000 now, if it turns out to be the kind of house that the assessor's algorithm likes, that person's taxes have gone up a lot, and those are the folks who I think we should bear in mind for how we figure that out. But when it was clear to me anyway that the residential exemption was never going to pass here, at least not in my lifetime, that's why I focus on the new growth strategy around DeCicco. Do I love DeCicco? No, but it basically does the exact same thing. Keeps taxes affordable if it ever gets built. All right. The Year-Round Housing Trust Fund. So this is kind of an interesting one. This is basically, it allows us to kind of have some new structures with some new powers, around the ability to accept gifts, purchase and sell, lease, employ people. Basically, it's kind of like, I think, for bigger towns in Stockbridge, but it's interesting. The one I think is do we not have that in?
I don't have that one.
Yeah, the printer jammed, so you may not have.
Oh, wait a minute. Attainable housing occupancy restrictions, is that where you were?
The next one is artist housing, actually. I think that no, year-round housing trust fund, and then we go to housing preference essential public employees. Like, if you work for the school district or, highway department, town hall, police, fire, then, you can get a preference for housing with this. It's a new kind of preference.
Patrick, is
There's
the,
artist housing.
Did we skip artist housing?
You just had artist housing. It's right after essential public employees.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
There it is.
Yep. And Mark, you had a question.
well, my question was, that there's a reference to being able to set up trust funds. Would that be redundant from what we already have here, or is there something new?
I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what the limitations on this trust are, for example, in receiving gifts. I know that the year-round housing trusts can also be regional trusts. And so we could work with other communities if we accept seasonal communities that have also accepted and start to basically kind of figure out how we pull our money. Stockbridge has got potentially a lot more money in its housing trust because of Elm Court and DeSisto, but we don't have a lot of good land to build on. So if we were to work with like Egremont, who's I think going to pass it in May, maybe Alford, that would give us the ability to sort of figure out where the best location for some of these middle-class houses would be. That it wouldn't necessarily have to be in Stockbridge. I hope that the artist housing though is across the street at either Freelandhuisen or at Tanglewood. I think Tanglewood would really benefit from housing. A lot of folks now can make more renting to Tanglewood in the summer than renting to a year-round person all year. It's one of the reasons we have a housing shortage around here for rentals. And I think that if we could apply things like artist housing to the folks who work at Tanglewood, you would take a lot of the air out of the rental market and free that up for more year-round folks. Just as one example.
Going back to, South Egremont or Alfred, I thought part of the reason of doing this is so that we would get the middle class back here in town to establish get our community back.
Because I think if we can find the land and find the money, I would love to build 25 houses here. I would love to build 100 houses here. I think that this was a better town a better community when we had a better mix of ages and of incomes in this town. And a lot of people say I'm sentimental, but that is just my opinion. I think that I think it gets harder and harder. I also think housing is a regional challenge, and especially where West Stockbridge has the big, I think it's like 25 acres. It's like a quarter, half a mile from downtown West Stockbridge that they want to put into this, but they don't have the revenue streams for it. So we could kind of do an all of the above strategy, especially with fire and the EMS stuff that we're doing with West Stockbridge. Look at a lot of these decisions are now above my pay grade. I'm trying to stay in my lane. My lane is housing right now. Whether or not we need municipal housing, it's one of the benefits. Same with artist housing.
Okay, thank you.
So, we don't have to, the 250 AMI, so area median income is like, if you're a single, it's lower than obviously if you're a family of 4 or 5. Right now with rentals, I think it's maximum is 80% of AMI, and with home ownership, it's 100, sometimes 110% of AMI. This allows us to go a little higher. So if you've got a working couple and one is a police officer and the other is an ambulance EMT, they're probably making 125 combined, and it's not enough to buy a house around here, but it's more than what area median income is for 2, or even for 2 with two kids. So this just gives us the ability to say, well, we don't necessarily want to subsidize that income of 250 grand, which would be basically 250% of a family of four median income. But we could peg it at 150%. It's a town meeting vote. It's not up to us. This is one of the issues that town meeting would have to decide. And in terms of the year-round occupant restrictions, these are deed restricted. So you got to be in them 10 months a year, So you want to go to Croatia in the summer and rent your place out, still you could. All right.
So Patrick, is that restriction for forever a restriction, or is there a time limit on that? So
I
if you were
believe
to
it's
build-
either 30 years or forever. I'm
wow.
not quite sure the answer to that. I remember there was some arcane law that maybe keeps it from being forever, but it's certainly, even 30 years is a very long time. I'm not sure it goes forever though.
Okay.
That's an open question that we would need legal advice on. Okay, waivers, compliant, and revocation. I don't think there's anything here that we need to kind of spend time on as we're already into the meeting with basically through half our time. Okay, we already did our needs assessment, so I think that's great. I think that now we need to figure out is what the town wants to be when it grows up, and we either accept it or we don't accept it. Then I think this committee, this trust will then come up with its game plan based on what the town decides. Okay. So here's the thing. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to send everyone, hold on one second while I figure out how to work my computer. Let's see, Patrick White. No, that's not it. There it is. Compose. And this next one is to AHT. And this is sample bylaw discussion. And I'm going to do an attachment. So for those of you on Zoom, if you check your mail in about a minute, that is going to be documents. Stockbridge. All right, it's the one called section 6.26. I'm also going to send you the presentation I just did. Just in case you don't have it. All right, it's on its way. Okay. Now, this basically, so the next one is, so what I did is I, took it upon myself to interpret what we would need to change in the Stockbridge bylaws if we wanted to adopt seasonal communities. Now, for people who aren't in a hurry, we could just adopt seasonal communities and the state gives us 24 months to change our zoning. The changing of the zoning is really straightforward, though. I think that it should be part of the conversation around whether we should adopt or not, whether people agree with we should adopt. This is a town meeting decision. And, it's not up to me. It's not up to any of the elected boards. It is up to town meeting. So I think that it's important to make sure that folks who have to decide are as informed as possible, because not everyone's going to like it. Not everyone's going to hate it, but the will of the people. I point this out because while there are some decisions, I went through and did the minimum changes required to qualify. So I didn't go any further than what the state has mandated, the 25% lot size, for example. So in R4, it goes down to an acre. Generally speaking, what this represents is the creation of a new section of our zoning bylaw that would be 6.26 seasonal community housing. And it would only be for that deed restricted attainable housing as is defined by the state. And it would not apply to any other free market housing. It would only apply to houses that are built for the deed restricted purpose of making sure that locals can live here. And I don't know that we should run through this now, but I do think we should get back together in the next several days after you've had a chance to look at it. And we should decide whether we're going to make a recommendation on going forward. I think that it's reasonable to just get it all done or to make a decision so we don't have to kind of being, it's getting worse and worse, as I pointed out. 12 kids in, 12 kids in the 12th grade, down to 3 kids in the 7th grade. I personally think that some of the problem is accelerating, it's not stabilizing. And I would like a decision one way or another from the town.
So Patrick, one of the things that I would say is it would be very interesting to know how many of these undersized lots there are, because I understand that one of the concerns in the town is that there would be a huge building spree, on these smaller lots. And I'm not sure how many there are. As I said before, it's like there are some constraints market constraints about why you'd want to build a house that is with this deed restriction. But I think it might be helpful to kind of have a sense, and maybe I can do a little homework on this before our next meeting. But
Michael Blake can give you in each district how many lots there are that are undersized. I think frankly that it is opponents ginning up the electorate because they're trying to land is expensive, but it is not that expensive. For you
but
to
if there
take a
aren't that
house,
many, but Patrick, if there aren't that many, then there shouldn't be that big.
but you could subdivide, so you can't really tell how many undersized lots there are, because if you have 4 acres and now it's only 1, you could conceivably put in 3 houses, but they would all have to be for your kids because, otherwise who's going to buy them if they can never resell them to a seasonal resident or other market-oriented uses? It basically cuts like 95%, 90% of the buyers out.
Yeah, we're not disagreeing.
Yeah, I know.
I think.
Yeah.
Plus, I would also point out that if the town adopted this and all of a sudden in the first year there are a flood of like 5 applications to build houses on sublots, the town can change its mind, and it can.
Well, but how about we not frame it as a negative? I would be ecstatic if instead of our 25, we got 100. It is not, there's something that is just broken around here. All right. And I'm sorry, but I'm not going to allow opponents to frame the debate. Oh my God, they might build some houses. Good. I think that who's most likely to be building those houses would be they subdivide and they want to have a house for their kids because then they can see their grandkids next door. A lot of people would be interested in that. And I don't see these zoning changes as a negative for this town. Look in the 1980s, there were a whole bunch of folks who, it was the Reagan era and there was a lot of money coming into places and we protected the outer sections of town with large lot zoning. I'm not saying we get rid of that, but I'm just saying that right now, what I think that the challenge for our day is that there ain't no young people and kids here. And if we don't fix that, the town of Norman Rockwell is a caricature of itself. I knew those kids growing up. You knew them, we were like all American apple pie town. We're like, Norman Rockwell captured it. And it just feels like we're more isolated now. We don't know our neighbors enough. There's not kids around to mow the lawns or shovel the driveways or all the things that small towns are known for. I just feel like I'm not, let's have the debate about whether building some houses is bad for the town or good for the town that are deed restricted permanently forever for, locals.
Mhm.
Okay, so we have those. All right, so I think that it would be premature, to necessarily vote on all this stuff. I mean, what do you guys think? Are you guys ready to say that we should just go in? I'm not that convincing. No.
Nope.
So let's go around the table. I've talked enough. So what are some of the questions or considerations that, both as a voter and a member of this trust that you think pluses and minuses should determine this outcome?
I've talked to a lot of people about this and I haven't found one person that wants to have it.
Yeah.
They're afraid that they're going to have, what they like about Stockbridge is the way it is, the way it Norman Rockwell did it with, these houses the way they are. And they don't want to see 5 and 6 houses popped up on a piece of land between other people's houses and being like every other town in Berkshire County that's doing this kind of stuff. Stockbridge has its own, I guess for a better lack of word, dignified structure. And they think if you put tiny houses in, and I agree with them, that it's just going to change what Stockbridge has always stood for.
People can already put tiny houses in there. Nobody does it.
They can, but if this passes, people are going to be looking for acreage to do it everywhere.
Yeah, maybe. Okay. Mark, what do you think?
Well, I think that, we have a national problem on a shortage of housing. We have a statewide problem. The state is trying to give communities tools to solve it because it pretty much has to be solved at the local level. And they've given us the accessory dwelling units. They're now giving us seasonal communities in places where the housing crunch is particularly intense. And leaving it up to the communities to decide how they want to proceed. I think we have what we have in Stockbridge. The zoning we have in Stockbridge is essentially designed to give us what we have, which is nobody's building any houses except for wealthy people, mostly from out of the area, who can afford the land and to build a big house on it. And that's all we're going to get. If you have to have 2 acres to build a small house, the land can make it a prohibitive thing for people trying to get by on what we call a middle income, a local person who works here. So if we don't do anything, we will continue to get what we have. And I know there's opposition to this, and I'd like to hear from people who are against it, to them have their alternative ideas for how to accomplish some housing for the workforce, or to flat out say we don't want it, and that's it. Not to pretend we do. If we don't, just put it out there, and maybe disband this committee, because if the town ultimately doesn't want this, what's the point of keep coming to meetings and drumming up ideas? I like the idea that you can have smaller acreage. I mean, the costs that go into a housing are obviously the land, the construction, materials and labor. And to me, the only way you address this is you have smaller lots that are more affordable, smaller buildings, and prefab.
And you take away the way to flip the ability to flip them. That's what this does as well, is it creates a secondary market for housing.
I like this because we have a distorted housing market through nobody's ill intent, but it's worked out that way. When you have a lot of people from, for example, New York with big checkbooks coming to decide to buy a house, people with local revenue, local incomes here can't compete with that. And I have no problem with the people who want to come here and have a wonderful weekend. I was a second homeowner here for 10 years before I became a full-time resident. So I'm sympathetic and understanding of that. And again, these folks haven't done anything wrong. They just want to be here. But it has distorted the housing market. It's driven up prices beyond the reach of local people. And I think you need to, I think I said this before, interject and somehow bend the marketplace to your will. And one way to bend the marketplace is to say, okay, all those second homeowners, with your big checkbooks, that's great. You can, go buy the houses you want. We're going to create another market for just local people who are committed to being here and staying here full time, so that only they will compete for the pricing of the house. Somebody who had one of these can still conceivably make some profit on it if they were there long enough. But it basically takes out the big checkbooks and puts it into the hands of local people. And in terms of density, if it's a 2-acre lot and you put 4 houses on it on half an acre each, it's not exactly Levittown, Long Island, with one cookie cutter house after another. It's still a lot of land, a half acre for 4 houses. I'm not a big fan of the tiny houses. They're not backyard kid playhouses. They're 20 by 20 is 400 feet. I mean, that's
That's a law. It can be up to like 600 feet with the law.
Yeah. I'm
700.
more like the accessory dwelling unit model of 900 feet, 900 to 1,000, because I think, again, if it's $400 or more per square foot, at 1,000 square feet, it's 400,000. It makes it a little more affordable. You can't buy a nice 3-bedroom, 2-bath house for 400,000. I think we would have to be in the role of subsidizing, perhaps with a down payment, or buy the land ourselves with our funds, get some state money to provide the infrastructure and water, sewer, and blah, 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 to go into that land so that what's left becomes affordable for people who live and work in this area. And again, if we don't intervene with something like this, we aren't going to change anything. And that may be the way most of the town wants it. And if that's the decision, I'd like it to be upfront and make it very clear, okay, that's the town that won't do middle-class housing. All right, there we are. But if we want to, we need some tools, and we need to get out of the overpriced housing market, smaller lots, smaller buildings, and have people who are going to be here and intend to stay here and send their kids to school here. This is a tool to do it. The state, again, is giving us some tools. We may reject them, and that's the prerogative of the town. But I support them because I'm on this committee. I'd like to see us create some housing for the middle class. I don't think we're going to do affordable housing in this town for such as Pinewoods. I don't see us any kind of a consensus for doing that. But the next step up is for that attainable housing, workforce housing, middle class housing, whatever you want to call it. And that's where I think we should have our focus. And this is one way to do it. And yes, it could conceivably have an impact on the town. We may drive around and see, oh, there's a 2-acre lot with 4 houses on it. But if they look nice and there's landscaping and a few trees up there, I don't know. I don't see the problem. But again, I've only been here 20 years, but people that have grown up here and maybe for generations have a different sense of it. The last thing I'll say about Norman Rockwell is Norman Rockwell, what I have read and know about him, would not be pleased to see that working class people cannot live in his town.
Yeah. I want to just make 2 points. One is there's 2 extremes in this town going on literally right now. This decision around tiny houses, which would basically put on the book something that is not already banned, but maybe if the lots get smaller, they become a little more realistic. At the other end of the spectrum, you have 38 houses in North Stockbridge and a proposal for a development that are 5,000 to 10,000 square feet each. Okay. Now, I don't know why it's any of my business whether you decide to live in a 10,000 square foot house or a 400 square foot house with a 200 square foot loft. It's your property, it's your money, and how you decide to build it. It's why the town, for example, the permitting boards cannot tell you what color to paint your house in most instances, and they certainly can't tell you what style to build it. That is against the law here, all right? Because people are free to decide for themselves how they should be able to live. And I guess it kind of shocks me that so many folks who are going to decide this, who are not like the 10,000 square foot types, kind of completely okay with, the McMansions have sprouted up all around the lake and all around some of these developments. And yet we're worried about, I took some kids on after a field trip to McDonald's from the Waldorf school. And I just did a poll. I said, would you rather live in your parents' basement if you end up staying around here or live in a tiny home? And every one of them said, it would be so cool to have a tiny home. Now, maybe we don't want 15 kids in a little neighborhood because maybe it'd be noisy. Boy, we're getting old. But I'm just saying, 3 of them said, that's never going to happen. The American dream is dead for our generation.
Well,
They're hopeless.
it is in Stockbridge. Housing is part of that dream.
My dad was what, 24? My mom was 20 when they bought my house, and he was working at GE without a college education.
Well, those days are gone.
Well, they are unless we fix them.
Well, we can intervene and try to mitigate that a little bit.
Yeah.
But this is it. This is
I would just say to the people who don't like tiny homes, it's not up to me. It's not up to me how you live, and vice versa. It's the land of the home of the free and the land of the brave, or whatever it is. Anyways, Jan, what do you think?
Well, so basically, I'm in favor of the town adopting this. And I think there's some flexibility in terms of the zoning to address the things that you mentioned, Coke. Because I don't think there's anything, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick or Mark or anyone. But I think, saying that you can build on undersized lots does not mean that if you have 4 acres or whatever, that you can necessarily, I mean, I think you could say, the town could say in their zoning provision that you have to have at least a half an acre. So we don't have a huge amount. I understand, Mark, that that means the land cost is more expensive. And that would make it harder for us to have attainable housing. But I think there's some way to work around some of that that would be amenable to the town, but also allow some development. And I don't know the exact answer right now, but I would be happy to explore that a little bit with the planning board and others so that, we can have something that is not frightening to part of the town that doesn't want a big development, but is also opening up opportunities to have some kind of development that would be attainable for, workforce and artistic and other housing. So I generally am in favor of trying that. As I said before, if it doesn't pan out in a year or two, the town can reverse itself and say, we're done, it's over. And so this is not a, once and for all decision. I think it's worth exploring whether there's a way to, develop the town in terms of a modest development that would allow some housing for the community we're talking about, but not have major, development zones or whatever all over town. And so I think it's worth exploring. I will say, as a second homeowner, I'm not in favor of the RTE, but
I get it.
and I know you mentioned that.
I frankly think I'm a little worried about the system. It's been a year and they haven't started. I think that Elm Court is got a great design and a huge impact on the tax base because we get revenue not only from the property, but from the room rentals and the restaurants. Basically, it in effect, the projected new growth from Elm Court, if it gets permitted, is about 30%, which is exactly the average savings on RTE. If you have a good new growth strategy, you don't need RTE. People don't need a tax cut necessarily. I just don't want to have happen here what's happened in some other towns just south of us where, the tax burden, once a school is built in some of these towns could be approaching $15,000 on average a year. A lot of us can't afford that. And we're going to have to kind of address that, in a way that nobody wants to pay taxes. But if Elm Court doesn't get permitted, frankly, I think that once the school gets built, even Doug Goody, the assessor, said in public session in a meeting, he thinks the time for RTE is when the school, hits the tax rolls. So, I don't know what to say to that.
We might disagree on that.
No, I know. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying that, yeah. It's once again, it's outside of my pay scale now. So I am not concerned about it.
I just
Okay.
think it's very divisive for the town, but we can move on.
I don't think it would necessarily have to be 35% or 50%, quite frankly. I mean, I've seen my taxes go up a lot in the last 10, 15 years. I mean, a lot in the last 10, 15 years. And my base pay doesn't, my pay has gotten less for all the things that I need to pay for. My last electric bill pretty much said, you have no money to spend this month. I mean, it's really scary. So I do agree with everything you said, Jan, except for that RTE. I just want to make sure that, we don't forget that laborers in particular, contractors, people who, plumbers, all these people who, they don't, we have very few of them. We have something like 672 less than we had 10 years ago in contracting. They can't live here, just like the EMTs. I mean, so I want to make sure that everybody's covered on this if we.
And and not for nothing, but the voters understand that. This was the top debated issue when I ran for reelection, for the second time. And, I got more votes than anyone in the history of the town. And I don't think that was because I have a winning personality. I think people care about taxes and they see the erosion in housing for their kids, the availability of housing for their kids. And they'd like to see more of their kids stay here and raise their grandkids here. And it was, I'm like kind of not exactly a poster child for, the nuclear family. I just made the point, said the obvious thing out loud that everyone had given up. And I don't think we need to give up. And by the way, that was unbelievably, I'm hearing rumors that people think I'm behind this 5-person select board thing. It's just a joke. I own the record for getting the most votes ever in a competitive election. Why would I ever run again? All right. Bruce, what do you think?
Well, for starters, I would like to say that I firmly support the concept of being able to have a town where the people that provide us the services that we need, police, fire, EMS, construction workers, plumbers, et cetera, have the ability to live locally. I like the fact that I can call on neighbors or would have the ability to more ability to call on neighbors when I have needs around the house. I think it's important that we have a town that basically is truly full service, not just from a perspective of what the town offers us, but from what the people in the town offer us. And so I certainly firmly support the concept of us being able to do something that will allow those workers, essential workers, public employees, artists, to be able to afford to live in this town, raise their families here, potentially have their kids raise their families here, children, grandchildren, whatever it may be, to bolster the school attendance and all the other things that Patrick, you've mentioned that go along with having a more robust and age and socioeconomically diverse population. I also but I am concerned about how we would, with seasonal communities and what it opens up, how well we would do in navigating whatever restrictions or limitations that we feel should be introduced and necessary to avoid our town becoming like, to avoid Stockbridge becoming like every other town that has just blown the doors open for massive development, small houses on minuscule lots, and so on and so forth. I think that there is, there's a sense of what Stockbridge is, and I don't want to. I mean, we moved here, and I've, over the 35 years that we've lived here in Stockbridge, we have been frequently second homeowners when we were, working in Eastern Massachusetts. Then when we retired, we were full-time for a while. And now we're all back to being second homeowners because due to family health issues, I have needed to, as not escape, but move to a place where I could be closer to my kids to help with the family health needs that I have incurred. But I truly value what Stockbridge has always been for us, the reason that we moved here, the reason that we have stayed here for 35 years. But I also am sensitive to what has happened. I mean, there's a good side in one respect to what has happened. I mean, we bought our first cabin in Beechwood for just under $200,000 in you know 35 years ago, um, and sold it 10 years later for significantly more than that, and enabled us to buy a bigger house. And the only reason we moved from that one, it was more in it was slightly larger than um, what one would call an ADU. And the only reason we moved from it was because our oldest son, after he graduated college and went to live in New York, called us one spring and said, "What weekend can I come to the Berkshires this summer?" And we said, "You can come any weekend you want. We'll be there every weekend." And he said, "That's why I'm calling you. I'm coming with 13 friends and you can't be there." And so we said, "Okay." We gave him the house on a weekend. We didn't have, significant obligations at Tanglewood or Jacob's Pillow or anything else with friends. And we got off the phone and we said, we need a bigger house because we don't want to be kicked out of our own place. Um, and but we would have stayed there. And we would still be there now if it wasn't for the fact that we were asked to not come to our own home because it couldn't accommodate us and our kids and their friends. Um,
Maybe you could
but
do 13 tiny homes that pop up out of the ground when you need them.
right, exactly. Um, so now that's a little bit of a bit of a digression,
Right.
but
So
it
Bruce, do
just
you support this or do you not support this? What do you think about seasonal communities?
I support the concept of doing something that allows us to be more flexible, but I need to understand how we're going to exercise that flexibility without creating, um, with all due respect, a Lee or a Pittsfield, or even Lenox with all the building that they're doing there. Um, and so I'm just concerned about whether seasonal communities opens us up to something if we're not.
Bruce, let me just ask you a question because you mentioned Beechwood. Okay, the first Stockbridge zoning required a 5,000 square foot lot, which is an eighth of an acre. If you had an eighth of an acre, you could build a house. And the people developed Beechwood and Mackinac Shores and Mackinac, whatever it is, all those communities down there took advantage of that in the late 1930s and 40s. Beechwood
Yep.
got built based on that zoning. And do you think that's a terrible community because the lot size is kind of small? I don't think Beechwood feels anything like Lee or Pittsfield. I like Lee, I like Pittsfield. I'm just saying. I think it
I
feels
don't, I,
pretty.
I like those communities. I like those communities as well, and I take full advantage of what they have to offer. And I agree with you. I mean,
But
um,
no, but my point is this, nothing that we're proposing is anywhere near the Beechwood zoning, which is basically as non-conforming as it gets. It's a bunch of 5,000 square foot lots. The smallest lot here is a quarter acre in zone one, which is 20,000 square feet. And in zone R4, it would be 1 acre, which is 43,000 square feet. A lot bigger than
I,
Beechwood lots.
I don't disagree. Well, a lot bigger than the minimal Beechwood lots. I mean, probably a significant number of the Beechwood lots are significantly greater than 5,000 square feet. I mean, my initial lot on Birch Lane was just shy of 2 acres. And so, and there's many lots, I mean, that are significantly larger than even what I had within Beechwood. So yes, there are lots that are smaller. I mean, particularly the ones right along lakefront, where there,
Yeah.
you could basically you could basically call to your next door neighbor just by opening the window. But once you get further into the core of Beechwood, the lots actually significantly exceeded that. But I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree. But I think that you know um, the Parkers wanted to build that community. I think predominantly for second homeowners, so people could
Yeah.
have it was sort of a camp mentality. They wanted to have a place where people could come for the summer. Initially, a lot of people, a lot of the players from Tanglewood would stay there for the summer. And the people that were there full time, they were more internal to Beechwood and had the larger lots. So, it really is a function of whether or not you're going to be able to navigate with the appropriate restrictions so that you don't create what some of the people, the long-standing homeowners in Beechwood, in Stockbridge, would rather not see. And so I support the concept, but we need to have some guardrails.
And I'll just say this about that, having been on the permitting authority, which is the Stockbridge Select Board, for every house that gets approved in this town, man, there's some really good lawyers. If you've got the resources and you have a non-conforming lot, they almost always could find some way to justify in the law that they could get a house that was not a seasonal cottage, but was a large 2, 3, 4,000 square foot house on a very small lot in often cases. I sat through dozens and dozens and dozens of these. And sometimes it feels like kind of the thing that would solve the working class problem we're not willing to do. But man, the planning board shut down looking at limiting, like in places like they do on Martha's Vineyard, aggregate house size. You can't build a house bigger than 2,000 square feet in some towns on Martha's Vineyard. People don't want to do it. People want a big house. And my freedom argument, if you want a big house, you should have it. But, I guess it kind of feels like to some people, once again, the thing that could kind of solve the local issue is so controversial. And yet people build McMansions and 10,000 square foot houses are like, nobody's even talking about those kind of decisions. Anyway, whatever. What do you think, Liz?
I already mentioned it, but how about Patty? We haven't heard from Patty.
Yeah, Patty, do you want to weigh in? We've got to be out of here in about 10 minutes, so try to keep it to a minute or two.
Well, I appreciate the offer. I'm actually about to leave the meeting because I have an appointment, but thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to say we had some confusion on the time, and the planning board's coming in there at 6:30, and we got to kind of not have to rush through these things. These are weighty issues, and look at all the people who turned out for it. Thank you, Patty, for doing that, by the way. Our one. Yes.
I have a question for Coke. So
Uh-oh.
no, it's not uh-oh. My question is, I heard your concern about and your neighbor's concern about kind of significant development in the community and kind of opposing this in general. My question is really, is there some kind of provisions that the zoning board could, or the planning board with the zoning could put in place that would alleviate your concerns about kind of significant development and therefore, help you and your neighbors be supportive of accepting the seasonal community? And I know you probably can't answer that, but you would right now because you haven't talked to them, but I wonder if you would talk with them and see if they're, what their sense is of whether that's a possibility. Because I think it would be good to have us all on board one way or the other with caveats, with kind of what are the parameters in which we would be supportive of this. So that's just my question to you.
Yeah, I can't say that I know the answer to that at this moment, but
I'm
I
sure.
will. And it's not just my neighbors. I've been all around town. So it's I'm not speaking for Glendale Middle Road. I'm speaking to everybody. And but I'll see if they have any. They just don't want to see 5 houses being smushed somewheres when the reason we moved here, the reason our families bought the properties that we bought was because, I'm going to use your thing, Bruce, you can't open the window and scream to your neighbor, We have property and they just don't want to see that. They don't want to see a beechwood.
Yeah.
I would just say that what I'm hearing from Bruce and what I'm hearing from Coke and your question, Jan, is that there's a fear of the unknown or the unintended consequences or opening a door and not knowing what's going to come pouring through it, you know? And I mean, if you could say, oh, gee, well, we're going to have 3 or 4 places around town where on 4 acres, there'll be 4 accessory dwelling unit size homes. You could quantify what you were looking at, and we can't do that. And I think that's one of the problems, and that probably will work against this proposal, is a fear of the unknown.
But do you really think Park Street and Church Street are all that bad?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Honest to God, it's like, those are great
I notice
neighborhoods.
Goodrich is 1 acre. We have Park Street, and Church Street. I mean, those are not. When I drive down those, I don't feel oppressed by any of what I'm seeing there. They look like normal houses and normal neighborhoods.
Yeah, when we're evaluating the Hans Morris property, one of the things I heard loud and clear, and I came around to agreeing with you guys, was we don't want to do a big thing. We think we should spread around town. And that was really kind of, frankly, low income housing. This is middle class housing for people like electricians. I mean, Jimmy Obenheim, who's an electrician in town here, tells me he wants to turn the business over to his son, but his son can't afford a house around here. This is like, yeah, I have 3 different contractors in Pittsfield. Yeah, I mean, I deal with a lot of people on these sorts of issues, and they all admitted to me that there is a Berkshire County price and a Stockbridge / South County price. For the really rich towns that have like lots of second homeowners, they charge twice as much for the same job. It is outrageous. It's outrageous whether you can afford to pay twice or not. But it's because we don't have the people in South County like they have coming out of McCann, an hour north of here in North Adams. It's competitive for electricians up there. It ain't around here anymore, you know?
Patrick, I do want to make one comment that I forgot to make. You made some comments that if somebody wants to, have a small lot and build a small house, that's up to them. And, it's more power to them. They can, I remember exactly what phraseology you used, but, that's on them. Well, I just want to say that that's not necessary. That may be true for them, but depending upon where they do that, it affects people around them. So it's not just the person that decides I can live in a 900 square foot house on a half an acre or whatever it may be. It's what impact do they and the other 3 half-acre houses that are on that 2-acre parcel, what it means for the people around them, and what impact is it a negative impact or a positive impact on the people around them that may basically have enjoyed the openness that they've had prior to those people in there. So again, there are areas in the town that I think would be ripe for the kind of development that would do this. It wouldn't have a negative impact. It might, that might address some of Coke and her colleagues' concerns or friends' concerns. But again, I think we need to be very cautious and conscientious about opening the door too wide, which seasonal communities may or may not do, without knowing what kind of guardrails we're going to create that will not result in, overpopulation and overdevelopment, which could definitely have a negative impact on the nature and the feeling of being in Stockbridge.
Yeah, good point.
I think a lot of the people are afraid that it's going to bring their property values down if you have all these little houses popping up around you.
Well, that's essentially what I was getting at with,
Yeah.
in response to Patrick's comment of, what's the big deal? If somebody wants to have a small lot and a small house, that's on them. Well, that's not necessarily true. It may very well impact the people. I mean, just like we found when we were pursuing Glendale Middle Road. We ran into other issues with pursuing Glendale Middle Road as a development with the sewage and water and the other utilities and so on and so forth. But the people that live on Glendale, the residents, the current residents on Glendale Middle Road, they were very concerned about what it was going to mean when a new road and a whole bunch of new small houses on smaller lots, basically, it was introduced into their neighborhood. And
So,
so
so Bruce,
that's to your point.
we need to adjourn in about a minute, but I just want to point out that the governor literally doubled density when she made ADUs by right. And in Stockbridge, which has like what, 1,500 homes? I think that the number is like one or two ADUs have gone in since then. And why? Because the economics of ADUs are bad, and you still have to, by the way, meet the standards of the Wetlands Protection Act. And this is one big giant like marsh in this town. And you know, the fact is that the gloom and doom around ADUs that we read about in the paper for the 6 months before those regulations were out, it's been like what, a year now, and the town looks exactly the same. And I just kind of feel like the economics of tiny houses aren't going to get much better, let alone like an actual house you can raise a family in, because it's still going to cost you several $100,000 to put one in. And unless you're getting some subsidy or, you know, or it's just not realistic economically to give up all that upside. You know, you pointed out the fact that you could afford your later in life home by selling at market rate your first Beechwood home. That goes away with seasonal communities for those houses. They are forever deed restricted. You cannot, you know, flip them. It's basically the upside is limited. And I think I think you're right though. Just listen to this. It may not pass, but yeah, that doesn't mean that, you know, we can't be for it. So
Yeah, I'd like to just throw out one other side to why there may be less ADU development than has occurred in the last year. Economics may be one, but the other one might be that people just don't want a second home on their property. They may not want, you know, something where they're going to, because of the economics, if they're not doing it for their children to be there with them, that they're going to be obligated to rent it, and they don't want somebody driving up their common driveway to get to this other house, this ADU that's on their property, and sharing that, because that's may be for them the opposite of why they moved to Stockbridge and why they bought in Stockbridge. So economics may be one, but the density issue may be another. I mean, you know, at this point in time, I have just under 5 acres. Now I'd have to do a lot of clearing because most of it's woods, but I could easily put an ADU in there, which was actually more than a half an acre. But I mean, I'm being selfish. I don't want, you know, somebody else, you know, in my backyard.
Yeah.
We have to vote on
We have to
the
go.
minutes that
we can
Liz
do that next time.
graciously gave us.
we don't have to vote on that today. We'll do it next time. How about a next meeting?
Sorry, Liz.
What's that?
Said, sorry, Liz. She got us all those minutes.
Liz, you want to vote on it? Make a motion. I don't care.
Yeah.
I make a motion that we accept the
minutes.
meeting.
Do we have a
the minutes
second?
that Liz gave us.
Do we have a
I'll
second? Okay, roll call. Hi,
Bruce,
Patrick.
I Coke.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Liz.
Hi, Jan.
All right, excellent. That was not hard.
all right,
Okay, so how
Patrick,
about
I did not get that email you sent out during the meeting. So if you could please send it to me again to
No,
my Gmail.
no. Bruce, you got to call Teresa and make sure that an email that the remailer works with is given to you. None of us can remember who's getting and not getting emails. Okay, this is on you. Okay, you gotta
the
just
one
call
you just-
Teresa.
He said
I
the one
get
you
I
sent
get
out
all of
tonight.
Liz's.
Yeah.
It's the one you just set out just
You
now.
just sent just now.
Oh, black
that.
tie.
I know. So clearly there's a problem with the town's email address.
But he
Turn
gets,
around, Liz.
he gets Liz's. He
Liz,
just
turn
got
around.
Liz's. He did it.
Yeah,
But it
Liz,
was
turn
Liz
around.
CCing his personal
Turn around.
address.
She's my
Liz, turn
hairdresser. She's getting me ready for the next thing.
All right.
Okay,
Yeah, I
so
think that we pay an IT guy like 50 grand a year to solve IT problems. and we should avail ourselves of that resource. We have a guy.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay.
I have,
All right. How about we,
Patrick.
I'll call
Next
Teresa
meeting.
tomorrow. Motion to
Patrick.
adjourn.
what?
Next meeting date, please.
How about the 17th, week from today?
I'll be out of town.
How about the 16th or the 18th? I can't do the 18th.
Is this
think I'm
in April?
No,
No.
in March.
I
March.
think I'm back on the 20th.
Okay,
So you're back on the 20th?
Let's make
Like
it,
early or late?
I think I'm driving back on that date, so it's probably not available till the 21st. What day of the week is that?
Friday's the 20th.
21st is a Saturday.
Okay.
right.
We're not doing it on Saturday.
So look at the week of the 23rd,
Okay.
Monday.
Monday.
How about Tuesday? I can't do Monday.
Um, do I have another meeting? That's okay.
5?
24th.
5. The 23rd.
I think that
24th.
how about we compromise at 4:30? We're once again kind of like, crunch for
Running out of
time because there's a lot of other meetings on Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays and,
So what are we doing? The 24th?
How
Yeah.
about 4:30 on the 24th?
What day of the week is that?
It's a Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Okay.
So Patrick, I have one little update
Okay,
of past business.
okay.
So you remember we were talking about having opening an investment account for the trust,
All right.
would be to allow people to donate securities as well as cash. And I spoke with, or I emailed with Erica Olson, who, by the way, had a little baby boy yesterday whose name is
Oh,
Yay.
David.
Yay.
Mazel tov.
Send her congratulations.
Yes.
Anyway, she is prepared to be the point
Keeper of
person
it.
who on our account if we want to open one like that.
Oh,
Or she said last she heard from us that we wanted to be our own little thing separate from the town. And so if we want to be our own little thing, maybe one of us would want to get bonded so that we could be the point person. So you guys can think about it. We don't have to decide it right now, but I guess I would opt for we open an account with the town and Erica could be the bonded person, the point person on it.
Does anybody have a problem with doing that?
No, I didn't know we wanted to be our own thing.
I think we can get a vote on the agenda for the next meeting, but you should tell Erica that informally, yes, we want the professionals to manage the money.
Okay.
Yeah. Also,
so-
it's a good control for us.
Yeah, so I will do that. And she's on maternity leave now, but she is communicating. So you guys should all reach out and wish her,
Right.
Congratulations on her new little baby.
Yep.
Excellent. And if you have any chat GPT stocks you want to donate, you now imminently will be able to donate them here. All right.
All right.
Motion to adjourn, please.
I make a
Motion
motion
to
to
adjourn.
adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
That was kind of a roll call.
That was good.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
All right.